Okay, and we are live here in Frisco, Texas, home of the FCS championship. As you can see behind me and my guy, Zach McKinnell here from FCS Football Central. We're here at the stadium, ready to give you guys some cool content. So, Zach, two exciting teams here, the number one and number two seed getting ready to play each other, South Dakota State and Montana. What do you think the keys to the game are for Montana in this game?
I think there's been a lot made about the defense for South Dakota State, which is fair. They're number one in the country in total offense, or total defense, and also scoring defense. I think it's actually what they do defensively, though, for Montana. When you look at the close games for South Dakota State this year, it's all been when you've stopped their offense. Montana kept them off balance throughout the game. They only allowed, 20 points in that game. And then Southern Illinois kept them under 20. And I don't think they were ever in danger of losing that game, but it was one of the closer games of the year. South Dakota State's too good. If they hit 30, Montana's offense is not good enough to score 30 points this weekend. And then also red zone efficiency. Montana has struggled at times putting the ball in the end zone. You look at that North Dakota State game, there were some times against Furman. Field goals aren't winning you a national championship.
No, they won't.
The defense is going to make you drive the field. They excel at not allowing explosive plays. If you do not put touchdowns on the board and they're putting touchdowns on the board, it doesn't matter what you do. You're going to lose this game on Sunday.
Yeah, and those corners for South Dakota State makes it hard for those explosive plays that Montana might normally get for them too. So
yeah, that's the big thing. Someone asked me earlier today about there's been this narrative. Obviously, the wide receivers are great for Montana. Junior Bergen's legit. Keelan White's legit. They have a lot of depth, but in the back end of the defensive safety. Yeah,
loaded on the back end.
Deshaun Gales might not put up crazy stats. He might not run the 4.3 or be the flashy athlete. 0 touchdowns allowed and only 38 targets this season. Yeah. That's elite, shutting down one side of the field, and then on the other side, Beanham's a turnover machine. 4 interceptions, 7 pass breakups. That's the key. Is if you turn the ball over, man, it's going to be a long day for Montana.
Yeah, and I think what you said, hold South Dakota State under 30 points.
Yeah.
Back to that point, that's going to be extremely hard for them to do. I think for Montana, their keys to the game, they have to establish the QB run for them for sure on their offense. Because if Clifton McDowell can get out of that pocket with that QB run, that kind of changes the game in a way, and that kind of makes it a little bit more of a challenge for South Dakota State to stop that.
Right. Yeah. If Clifton McDowell can use his legs and extend plays, which he did during the regular season, the one thing that worries me about Clifton, though, and we'll talk a little bit about it later, is it seems like in the playoffs he's been a little bit hesitant, where he's gotten out of the pocket, he's used his legs to escape pressure, but he's waiting too long to throw it down the field before taking off. All season, utilize the formula that got you to the dance. And it seems like because the stakes rose a little bit, he's taking a little bit too long to think. And I think him playing freely is a huge key for Montana.
Yeah, if he plays freely and if they can win that field position battle on special teams, that'll help him play a lot freer. Junior Bergen back there, we've all seen what he's done, kickoffs, punt returns, but he doesn't have to take one to the house, in my opinion. I think if he can just, get that field position to start at the 40. So even if they don't score on a drive, they can punt and back South Dakota State up, put the hands of that defense. Because as good as South Dakota State's offense is, it's hard for anyone to drive a full 80 yards time after time after time after time again. So I think that could be a key point for them too.
Yeah, because I think you go back to the Villanova game, which is really the only playoff game that they were tested. They had 2 shutouts over Mercer and UAlbany. Villanova had so many opportunities to hit big plays. You look at that drop touchdown pass, and the play after that was that block punt return for a touchdown.
Exactly.
You had a chance to get up 2-3 scores on South Dakota State potentially and extend that lead.
And make them uncomfortable.
And then it flipped, and they got the lead now. And in the second half, they had the lead. They don't have to throw the football. And Isaiah Davis runs for 120 in the second half or something crazy like that. If they give you downfield opportunities and you don't hit on them, it's a recipe for disaster.
Exactly. And that's why I think for the defense for Montana, they have to figure out how to make them one-dimensional too.
Yes.
Got the Yankee twins. You got Isaiah Davis. You got Mark Gronowski. So it's a lot of talent for them. Yeah. So you got to take away something.
Yeah, you can't let them be, because the problem, and I would take away the run game, because we've seen Isaiah Davis take over playoff games. What, 12 of 15 games? He's over the 100-yard mark. Let's not forget, last year, Amar Johnson was the breakout star of the game, and he tore the Bison defense up. You cannot let them run the football because when Gronowski can work off the play action and the Yankee Twins can get downfield, it's going to be a long day. And they have too many weapons. You have to take away something. But also, let's not forget about Zach Hines.
Exactly.
7 touchdowns, 4 for 2 touchdowns against Albany, and he's a matchup nightmare, man. When you're 6'7", 260 and can go play in the slot, it's a problem.
Yeah, those tight ends for South Dakota State are almost a FCS tight end U for them.
Yes.
And I think also you have to, like you said, the backup running backs, you can go back to when Sam Houston was here. You had Isaiah Davis as a backup back then, and he was having a great day. So it's really, they have to stop a team run game for them. It's not just stopping one player. If they can stop the team run and hold them onto 100 yards, which I don't know, it's going to be a hard task, especially with those big boys up front for them. I think that's the key for them.
Yeah, and I mean, even too, you look at Montana, they're deep at the running back too. I mean, Eli Gilman, of course, is going to go get his Jerry Rice Award tonight, but he's kind of been quiet in the playoffs. He hasn't had that breakout performance yet. Nick's kind of taken more of the brunt of the load throughout the playoffs. Eli's going to have a big game because if South Dakota State's bringing in Amar, you've even got Angel, who's seen limited action but has a lot of talent. I know they're excited for him next year. You can't let them rotate fresh bodies in and you be one-dimensional, and your Jerry Rice Award-winning running back is taken out of the game.
Yeah, and that's why I think for South Dakota State, they have to stop that QB run. Like I said earlier, if they can stop that QB run, that means it's going to fall on the shoulders of a Jerry Rice Award winner. And one thing we know about Jerry Rice in those Super Bowls, he always stepped up in those big games. So
yes,
he has that Jerry Rice Award. He has to step up to that same level. So I think also for South Dakota State offensively, if they stick to what got them here offensively, and they don't get too pretty, we might have a Walter Payton Award. We'll get into that later. If they don't try to put the ball in his hands to take over the game and get rid of that balance, I think that would be an efficient day for them. One of the top efficient offense in the country. I think that'll be the keys for them.
You almost look at not only just stick what you have offensively, just do what you've done all season. Because, and I think it kind of goes back to the, what's the famous quote now, the rat poison. Everyone, I mean, they're almost 14-point favorites. Everyone's picking them. Everyone's like, there's conversations going on right now that they might be a top 10 team of all time in FCS history. Kind of block all that out. Just do what you do, and then we can have that conversation. We got 6-7 months of the off season to talk about that. Just get to the championship. Don't overthink it.
Yeah, we saw with the 73-9 Warriors.
Oh,
got to the finals, didn't get the job done.
Patriots
undefeated didn't get the job done. So it doesn't matter if you don't win the ring. And we got a question in the YouTube chat. What's the weather forecast for the game? Anything of note? So I don't know about you, but it's been cold down here for Texas. It's been cold down here the past few days, cloudy. You can see the sun has come out for the first time all weekend behind us. So it's going to be warmer, 60 degrees, which for South Dakota and Montana, that's warm. South Dakota State, excuse me. South Dakota State and Montana, that's warm for them. It's cold up north, so 60 degrees should be a nice warm day for them. So what are some of your keys of the game, Zach?
Yeah, I think it's keeping Clifton McDowell in a box. You kind of talked about that earlier about taking away his legs. I like saying keep it in a box because it's not able just using his legs, but when he gets out of the pocket, if someone's open downfield, he has the arm strength to get it to him. I think back, a play that really stuck out to me about his development is there was a play against Montana State where he was rolling out, had to flip his hips and hit a post route going the opposite way, dropped it in the breadbasket. You cannot let him freestyle and use his athleticism. Keep him in the pocket. And your South Dakota State's defensive line has slowly matured throughout the year. 0 sacks in the first 3 games, but they've been getting after the quarterback. Turver at defensive end is a guy that I look at to possibly have a big game. They got experience at D tackle. Keep Clifton in the box. Stay disciplined in your rush lanes, and then also they have a bunch of linebackers. Freeman, Stallbird. I mean, Stallbird's an interesting one because they drop him in coverage a lot. He's pretty much a glorified box safety, but he's athletic enough where if they use him as a spy, I don't know if Clifton's beating him to the edge consistently because he's just as fast. So I'm interested to see if they spy and if they trust Stallbird with it, or they give it to Freeman or Bach or even one of those guys. But I think Stallbird versus McDowell is going to be a crazy one. Then also to establish a rushing attack. I kind of talked about that earlier. Yes, we might have a Walter Payton Award winner quarterback. We'll see later tonight. Isaiah Davis is the key. If when he hits 100 yards, they win almost all the time. So you cannot let him get off. And then also too, like I talked about, they have so much depth. And the offensive line is such a big identity. You know, the 605 Hogs, and you got all this experience. Gus Miller just won the Remington Award for the FCS, multiple All-Americans, McCormick, Greenfield. It's a problem if that offensive line gets rolling. And then you bring in Zach Hines at 6'7", 260. Last year was playing with a broken foot.
He's the size of a lot of FCS
Yes,
offensive linemen out here.
absolutely. And that's why he's going to be, in my opinion, one of the top tight ends of the draft. And I think this is a game where they can bring in 6 offensive linemen. Then you got Isaiah Davis, who's as big as a linebacker. Because I mean, you see him in person now. He's every bit as like on TV. It doesn't translate. The kid's a problem. So you cannot let them run the football. Make Gronowski beat you, and he might be able to, because he's a stud too. And you got the Yankee twins and all those weapons. You got to take what they do best away, which is to running the football.
Yeah, for sure. And I think now we can get into some of our X factors for both teams. So if we get into some of the X factors for both teams, I think there's a couple X factors we can look at for both, whether that's Montana or South Dakota State. So who are some of your X factors for South Dakota State?
I think I talked about one earlier, Zach Hines, just because he's such a.
Or actually, let's go into Montana.
Yeah.
Let's go to Montana. Let's go to Montana first.
I'll start defensively. Alex Governor. Now, I don't like picking X factors that are maybe the best players. It almost seems like a cop out. But if Alex Governor does not have a big day, Montana doesn't win this game. Because when I look at the 3-3-5, and you're a football guy too, if those guards are getting up to the second level, those tackles, man, there's those rush lanes are as wide, and me and you might be able to get some yards behind that offensive line. I think Governor taking up space in the middle, creating some negative plays, which South Dakota State's been really good at not allowing. I mean, you saw that UAlbany team leading the country in tackles for loss, leading the country in sacks. They allow 0 sacks and 1 tackle for loss. Governor's going to have to take up space in the middle. I don't know if he'll have a big stat day, which defensive tackles usually don't. Take up space, allow Braxton in that linebacking core to move sideline to sideline without getting touched, because Montana's a little bit undersized in the second level, but they have the athleticism and the toughness that makes them dynamic. If you got Mason McCormick hitting Braxton every single play, it's not going to be a good day for them. So Governor's going to have a big day. And I talked about Clifton. He's going to have, and I know he's not up for the award per se, a Walter Payton type performance to win this game. And he's got to limit his turnovers. He hasn't turned the ball over a lot, but over 50% of his turnovers have come in the playoffs. It's not going to work. You cannot have one interception can end the game for them, but he has to trust himself, play freely. And that would be my message to him is don't change what got you here, because we saw against Furman, there were some guys open where he could have taken some chances
for sure,
and he second guessed it,
especially downfield.
Yes, and so this is a game where everything's off the table. If you want to be holding that trophy behind us, you've got to take some shots.
Yeah, and I love what you said about Governor and comparing it to UAlbany, because UAlbany, they were edge rushing team, but those guards, Gus Miller, they took advantage of a weaker interior line for UAlbany, the Great Danes. But Governor is a different level. The last time they faced them, probably someone at the level of Governor might have been North Dakota State.
Yeah.
And I think Governor's better than anybody on North Dakota State's interior. So
yes, maybe Valdez for Montana State, because he's a big guy. But I don't think they face. I mean, I think me and you both agree. Governor's probably the best D tackle in FCS football
for sure.
But it'll be an interesting thing because he's big, but he's not. I mean, the offensive line for South Dakota State, I don't think Montana's facing an offensive line as big as them. And probably the best offensive line they faced was Montana State, and they dominated that game. So it'll be a really interesting matchup. It's strength versus strength, which I love in college football, is when you do something well and the other team is good at stopping that, someone's got to prevail.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see if there's any we have any more comments in the chat, any questions that we have. We do have a question here in the YouTube. Is there an MVP of these games named after a championship? Yes, there is an MVP. Last year, Mark Gronowski did get MVP for South Dakota State. So there is a returning MVP in this game. So that will be cool to watch. Is there any more questions? So yeah, any fans watching live, whether that's Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Bleacher Report, probably Facebook, any fans watching live, feel free to ask me and Zach some questions and we'll try to answer them the best we can. Don't ask us anything too deep. This is just a live chat. We don't have everything in front of us, but we will answer your questions. So now let's get into some of my X factors for the game. I also think Clifton McDowell is an X factor. I agree with almost everything you said. I think for him, he has to be able to stay poised. That's the biggest thing for a quarterback. If he stay poised, which I've seen him do a lot of times this season, he stayed very poised. So I think, like you said, he has to be comfortable with playing his game.
Yes.
Don't let the pressure of undefeated team, 28-game win streak get to him, and he just plays his game and he's good to go. And then, of course, like you said, it's hard to not pick the star players, but the reason I say Junior Bergen is an X factor is not because of what he does in the passing game, but only because of the return game. Like I said earlier, the special teams. He doesn't have to score. If Junior Bergen can be the MVP of this game without scoring, then Montana wins this game.
Yes.
All he has to do is return.
You know, it was funny. I was on a show earlier today with my co-host, Coach Fred, and they asked him, as a coach, would you kick to him? And he was like, listen, we learned way too much from that Colts Bears Super Bowl. Dungy was like, man, we're going to test him. We're going to set the tone, kick to him. Don't find out.
Yeah.
Just don't kick to him. And I think someone asked Jimmy at the press conference about it, Coach Rogers, and he said, yeah, you know, we aren't really focused on keeping it away from them because they can be creative on offense and get on the ball, but you have to try to limit those opportunities. So I don't know, you know, don't be crazy and onside kick it or kick it out of bounds. Just I'm interested, will they squib kick it? Will they try to pin him in the corner? Will they trust Hunter to kick it out the back? I don't know, but I don't see Jimmy being like a Tony Dungy and being like, we're gonna set the tone.
Yeah.
We're giving 5 that kickoff to start the game because if knowing Junior, that's all he's looking for. And I asked him yesterday if he thought he was hoping to get some opportunities. He was like, I'm always hoping to get that shot. So just do not kick the 5.
Yeah, and that it's not even just him, it's the blocking they get is elite. Like if they're setting up a wall, everyone's going to that wall. That's that kind of commitment you see from a team like Montana does on that special team. That's something that starts in the summer, and they actually worked on some of their special teams a little bit when I was up there at one of their fall camps. They worked on their special teams. We didn't get to see too much of them. I tried to ask our videographer Denver Morris if he had any videos of Junior returning some kicks. I thought that could be a cool before and after type of video, but we didn't really get to see too much of it. But they were practicing special teams and making sure they were going full speed. So it's something that's really ingrained in them and coach. So that's really good for them. So now we'll get into some more of South Dakota State's keys or X factors. We already did the keys to the game. So we'll get into some of the South Dakota State's X factors. So I think for South Dakota State's X factors, the first one I'm going to go with is Hunter Dustman, the kicker. And that kind of relates to that special teams aspect of the game. I think he is one of the best kickers and punters in the FCS. He does both. And he has the leg strength to get it, whether it's angle it to the right point. I think if they do kick it to him, they have to make sure they kick it outside the numbers for sure. Have to kick it outside the numbers. And if he's going to reverse field, whoever has that contained, it's all on that person to make sure everyone has to do their job. But I think when you have a kicker like Dustman, you have to challenge him to make sure he kicks the ball to where it needs to go.
Yeah, you have to be strategic. I mean, obviously, it's not always going to be perfect, but if you're going to let him touch the football, you have to dictate the terms of that. Because if you mess up and it doesn't have a lot of hang time, it's in the middle of the field, start getting a little bit nervous. And you got to trust your special teams too. And South Dakota State's been a good special teams team, so I'm not super worried about it. But it's just still, I think every fan that's going to be here tomorrow, everyone in the press box, but if 5 touches the ball at all on special teams, everyone's holding their breath.
For sure. And my other X factor for South Dakota State is Griffin Wildy, slot receiver for South Dakota State. And the reason I say this is if you look at the games, right, who were South Dakota State's closest games this season? Montana State, Southern Illinois. Griffin Wildy scored in both of those games. All attention is going to be on everyone else, not this freshman slot receiver, because he hasn't been here before.
Right.
Everyone else has been here before, so you know what they're going to do. That you know they've already gotten adjusted to the bus ride, plane ride down to Frisco, all the pregame events and everything. Griffin hasn't, so you don't know how he's going to come out. But if he comes out and steps up in a big game like he's done the last 2 times they needed him, I think he could be the X factor for them winning.
I'm really interested to see how he matures as a player because we know the Yankees are going after this year. They're going to be losing a lot of weapons. He looks like the next guy for South Dakota State. And the fact that they trusted him in the biggest moment. Me and you were both in Brookings for that Montana State game. To trust him to make that play in that moment, And then what, the second or third game of the
Second
year?
game.
I mean, that's a lot of trust for a true freshman. And he went out there and balled out, and he's just delivered in clutch moments. I think that's a great pick because I do think his potential is through the roof.
Yeah, and I think if Griffin can really step up to the plate and be that kind of third weapon, whether that's you have the running attack, whether that's whoever's running the ball, and then you have the outside passing attack. If you can put stress on those linebackers, whether they have them in those zones and take advantage of those zones, or even if the linebackers are covering them man to man, if you can win those matchups, I think it could be a great day for South Dakota State's offense.
Yeah, it definitely could. I mean, getting just flipping over to the other X factors, I think that's kind of why I look at Zach Hines as that guy, because you look at Isaiah Davis is probably number one. Obviously the quarterback's going to be one. You got the Yankee twins who have been balling out in the postseason, but Zach Hines' versatility is such a matchup nightmare because you look at the strength of Montana's defense is governor in the middle, their linebackers in the run and creating negative plays, but they're not really coverage guys. And they got Corbin Walker on the outside, Trevin Gradney on the outside, but they really don't have a true coverage safety. Their safeties are really good getting in the box, making plays like that, delivering big hits. Zach Hines is all of 6'7", 260, and he's athletic. He runs good routes, and they trust him blocking too. Because of his versatility, that's why I consider him the X factor, because even last year with a broken foot, he was kind of the X factor for them in terms of running the football. There were a lot of times where he had the key block or the final block on whatever scheme they were running. I think Zach Hines is that X factor because he's a matchup nightmare for what Montana does well defensively.
And how much do you think Hines having to sit behind Tucker Kraft and those guys for a couple of years, even last year when he had to sit behind him to start the season before Kraft got hurt in that first game, and how much do you think that kind of helped him as a blocker? Because of course, if you run two tight end sets, a lot of times you will be blocking in those two tight end sets. How do you think that helped him?
I think it always helps to have NFL guys ahead of you. And he told me yesterday because I asked him about his versatility. He was like, "Man, we don't get to play here if we don't block." He said that comes first. He said the 7 touchdowns, the receiving numbers, that's second. He was like, to see the field here, even as a wide receiver, you have to block. And also, too, Coach Olson serves as the O-line coach and the tight end coach, which really gives their tight ends a strong foundation in blocking because they get to be with the offensive linemen and get to be in that room, get the same type of coaching. And I think that's why you see their tight ends so successful at the next level. And you already see Tucker Kraft making an impact already for the Packers up there. Hines is the next guy up. And I think his 7 touchdowns in the red zone, that's where it's key because the Yankees are good at creating explosive plays, making plays in the open field. He's just a matchup nightmare. And you even saw Gronowski, some of those passes for the touchdown, it was tight windows. He just trusted his guy to go and get it.
Yeah, I saw Hines catch a couple back shoulder touchdowns. I saw one of those back shoulders. I was like, okay, that's like for someone who you would assume at that size is more of a blocker than a receiver. He showed that he can do both at a high level with being able to contort his body, flip back shoulder. A lot of tight ends aren't going to do that. So
no. And then I think the other one is Deshaun Gales. I already kind of talked about it. I said earlier on the show I was on, I think he's the most underrated player in the FCS for anyone, just because I know it's hard for people who just kind of look at the box score until you look at like the advanced analytics on receiving percentage numbers, targets, stuff like that. You don't understand how dominant he is. To only be targeted 38 times over 14 games. He's allowed under 15 catches. The guy has shut down the side of the field, and when he can't create turnovers, he does 2 picks. But I think the biggest thing for him is him shutting down the side of the field helps out the guys like Beanham and Lars to take a little bit more chances. And that's why you see the turnover stats kind of inflated for them because they know on this side, that guy's not getting anything. And the reason I picked him as an X factor, I know South Dakota State trusts Beanham and they trust their other corners. I want to see 5v5. Tomorrow. Wherever Junior Bergen goes,
follow him across the field.
I want Deshaun Gales to be the guy across from him because, like I said, I love good versus good matchups. I think it's one of the best playmakers in the country versus one of the best corners in the country, and I want to see that matchup. I don't know if he'll travel, but that's something I'm going to be watching because when he does travel, that's a matchup that everyone in the stands and everyone watching at home should pay attention to.
Well, against Montana State, when we were at that game, he followed Cleavon Thomas, and those were some good matchups. He didn't get the ball. The ball didn't go that way, so they didn't scheme towards that side. They schemed away from it, whether that was with Chambers rolling out or Malott even before Malott got hurt in that game. So I think there is a lot of chances for good on good matchup. It just depends if they're going to test them.
Yeah, and I trust Beanham. I want to specify because I do think Gales is that good, but Beanham's capable too. And he kind of gets overshadowed. They have so many stars, but I'm interested to see, well, are they going to test them? Because we talk about, are you going to kick to Bergen? Are you going to give him a chance? Are you going to give Gales a chance to make a play? Because he made a play last year to win the game. And now, I mean, it might have been a give me interception or whatever, but he still made the game winning interception in the game clinching. He makes plays in big games. And if he takes away 5, that puts so much pressure on Beanham because they got 2 other guys that can go make plays, and Aaron and Keelan White. If they can stop Bergen, can Beanham shut down the other 2 weapons?
Yeah, and I love what you said about all those corners. As a former corner myself, I love secondary talk. And watching both of these secondaries, I think is going to be a treat. I think all the corners out there are capable of shutting down any of these receivers. So I think I love the matchups. The matchups should be good. I want to see if they follow. I want to see who plays the short side of the field, who plays the wide side of the field. I think for Beanham, I kind of like Beanham more when he plays that short side of the field because it lets him take more of those risks for him. And I saw some of that when South Dakota State did play Montana State. That's how they kind of set it up. So I wonder if they're going to follow that same kind of strategy in this game.
They should, because then on the back end, Tucker Lawrence plays so free. And I think he gets overlooked a lot too because and I mean, let's not forget the return game too. Tucker Lawrence could be a problem. I want to say after the playoffs, he's one of the top punt returners in the country in terms of average this year. So it's going to be special teams are going to be so crucial in this one.
Yeah. So now we're going to get into an all-time ranking here. I know you mentioned earlier, some people are saying South Dakota State is going to be a top 10 team of FCS history if they win this game. But let's not get into the teams. Let's get into the dynasties. South Dakota State and Montana are 2 of the greatest programs we've seen in the FCS. Of course, South Dakota State, that's since 2004 for them. But in that short time, they've been one of the greatest programs. So you got a couple schools here, South Dakota State, Villanova, Montana, North Dakota State, Youngstown State, Montana State, and Eastern Washington. If South Dakota State wins, would they rank higher than Montana all time in FCS history?
I'm not going to go that far yet, just because, like, do they have the stronger, I guess, 2-year period, 3-year period? Because, I mean, really and truly, they were 1 play away from winning, 3 out of 4?
3 out of 4.
So they're in the conversation. It's just the thing with Montana that I give them the edge on is longevity. Because we've seen them do it in the 80s. We've seen them do it in the 90s, the early 2000s. And now here we are in 2024 and they're back. They made a title, in 2009 was their last one. So because of the longevity argument, I'm going to give the edge to Montana in the all-time rankings. But I do think even like a South Dakota State, I would put them above a Eastern Washington personally. I think I would probably put them above a Montana State right now, just because Montana State really hasn't got it done. They've been good.
1984.
Yeah, 1984 was the last one. And then I understand Malott got hurt. I get it. I don't think that team was competing with North Dakota State, even with a healthy Tommy Malott. So I'm putting them over Montana State as well. But then when you get into the Montana, the North Dakota States, even the Youngstown States that had sustained dynasties where they were winning titles consistently, I think South Dakota State's got to put a few more together before we can put them, in the top 3 or anything like that.
Yeah, I think there is going to be an argument though, especially if they beat Montana to move them all the time. But I kind of agree that longevity aspect. But I would think if South Dakota State wins, they are above Montana State. Mm-hmm. I might even put them above a Youngstown State all time because Youngstown State has those 4.
Yeah.
But if you're thinking of like comparing it to basketball, you have Indiana. When's the last time Indiana won?
That's true.
So it's like, if South Dakota State has been dominant over that kind of stretch, Youngstown had that short stretch. So I might move South Dakota State slightly above.
That would be interesting, especially I think if they win it again, like I'm not even just saying next year, if they win another one in the next 2-3 years, I think I'm with you on that one. I just want to see them win more than 2.
More than 2.
I think the argument between 4 and 2 is a lot different than 4 and maybe 3 titles. And I still think they probably are kicking themselves because that Sam Houston game was there for the taking. And if they don't have the injuries during that game that happened, they're probably sitting here about to win 3 out of 4 in Frisco. So I think South Dakota State's in the conversation, I don't know if I'd be willing to put them up there because I do think I think we're both here. Like North Dakota State's got to be at 1.
Oh, for sure.
But so they got a long way to get to that competition, but I think they're definitely in the conversation in that like 3 through 5 range.
For sure. And then what about Montana? And fans watching, feel free to give your ranking of these teams all time if they win. So what about Montana? If Montana wins, where would you rank Montana all time? Of course, behind North Dakota State.
Yeah.
Of course, it's been a while for them since they have actually won one. They have 2. Dave Dickinson got one, and then forgot.
I think you got to probably. I think there's an argument for 2, just because they've been to so many and they've done it over such an extended amount of time. And let's be honest, this would be in the Frisco era at least, probably one, in my opinion, one of the bigger upsets all time. I mean, it's the 3rd largest spread in the Frisco era, but I don't even think the spread does it justice. I mean, you're looking at this team, like, because I was, we may talk about a little bit. South Dakota State, there was a conversation about where would they rank all time as this team. And it's a consensus top 10 from a lot of people I talked to. And they're even talking about, some people are talking top 5. If you're beating a team like that, after the September you had where, I mean, no one was putting them in the top 25, Stan. I mean, everyone was like, we got to fire this guy. We got to let this guy go. They can't figure out quarterback. Clifton McDowell was arguably the hottest quarterback in the country at the end of the season. And now that if they finish it off with an upset win, and let's just say, you never know. I mean, there's been times where dynasties, you can kind of point to like that Clemson Alabama game where Trevor Lawrence goes out there and dominates them. You can go back to the 90s and look at when dynasties ended or when streaks ended. And if they end the win streak in a dominant fashion this weekend, I mean, you got to put Montana up into the top 2.
Yeah, I think it'll be an argument really with Montana and themselves, depending how they win. Yeah. So I think it really depends how they win too.
Yes.
If it's a classic, it helps. If it's a blowout on their end, it helps. But if it's just like a slow game, they kick a field goal with like 10 minutes to go to go up 10 and then just does it, the excitement just kind of fades away, then I think it will keep them up there, but it won't have the bigger impact like kind of iconically as it will. So I think how they win also will help them. Now, if Montana loses, do you think that would drop them any below?
No, I don't think so. I mean, just because, I mean, to drop them, that means someone has to pass them, and none of these other teams outside of South Dakota State are here. I mean, Villanova got beat by the same South Dakota State team this year. Montana State, in my opinion, was the most underachieving team of the season. And it was a disappointing year for them. So they're not moving. Eastern Washington was a dumpster fire this year, so you can't move them up.
Yeah.
I mean, and then Youngstown State made the playoffs, but you saw what happened when they got after they got past Duquesne, which was going to be a win for them. So there was no one to really move above them. So I don't think it hurts them in the grand scheme. I will say, Montana fans will be looking like, man, that's a lot of losses in a row in the national championship. It's like
in a row.
2001 is a long way away. I mean, so I think it would. The fans would love it, but I don't think it drops them in the all-time rankings.
It'll be kind of like the Texas of the FCS a little bit. I've seen that kind of joke going around if they lose this one. But all right, I think let's see if we have any questions in the chat. So we already talked about SDSU's rank all time. We have some Montana State fans saying the Bobcats Revenge Tour will be completed 1 year from tomorrow. It's interesting. That's an interesting one.
Shout out to my guy, Ron.
We have someone saying, Stan, what are you planning to wear tomorrow? That's something you got to just wait and see. You have to just wait and see. I might change my mind, go get some online shopping and get some Amazon coming in. And we do have score predictions, but I think we can get into a score prediction if we do that, maybe at the end. We'll get to score prediction at the end. So we have some Grizz fans in the chat. We have some Jacks fans in the chat. But let's do a kind of another snake draft, player draft, top 5 players from each team. So 5 players for you, 5 players for me. Let's play rock, paper, scissors. Let's do rock, paper, scissors on the screen. Let's make sure they can see it on the screen to see who picks first. All right. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. All right. Oh, I just gave away my rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah, now next show we do together, I know where I'm going.
The whole world now knows I like to go rock first. All right. My top player, I got to go quarterback, Walter Payton, Mark Gronowski for 1.
Oh. I guess for my first, I'll probably go Isaiah Davis at running back. I think there's an argument he might, even though he won't win the Walter Payton, there's an argument he's the most dominant player in the FCS.
Yeah, okay. Isaiah Davis. I'm going to, well, I'm not going to give you away who I might pick later, but I'm going to go defense, get Alex Gubner.
I'll probably go Deshaun Gales at corner for my
Okay.
second pick. Like I said, I'm a huge fan of his game.
Gales at corner. Gales at corner. Okay. I'm going to go with, gotta get the Jerry Rice Award winner, Eli Gilman.
Yeah, and I'll go Junior Bergen.
Ah,
Yeah. If you're gonna leave him this long, I got to take him a third pick. I mean, I can't let him get to the end.
okay. I think if you got a receiver, I got to get one to match. Can I get both twins? I mean, if they're both on the team, I can just rotate them. You can't really tell the difference.
I'll let you have it if you let me have my next pick because I'll get a group 2 next pick.
Okay, yeah.
I'm gonna take the offensive line for South.
Oh, okay,
yeah. I'm an offensive line guy. It's hard to, we only got 5 picks. We got 5 positions, so
Okay.
I can't pick them all.
Okay,
but I'm definitely taking the offensive line for South Dakota State.
Okay, and then my last guy in that secondary, I'm going to have to go with Trajon Cotton from Montana to get that secondary. I like his versatility, so that'll be my 5.
Oh man, and got one more. I guess I got to get a quarterback in this scenario, so I'll go Clifton. I'll get Clifton. I think giving Clifton Jr. and the protection of that offensive line, yeah, I think we're going to be rolling.
All right, so which team do you think is best? We'll let you guys decide. Maybe we'll clip this and get it out there so you guys can decide again later. So now we're going to get into, we just picked some award winners.
Yep.
Let's get into the Walter Payton Award finalists. 3 finalists you have. Oh, someone in the chat said Eli Gilman is him. I love that phrase that has emerged over the last few years, the him phrase. It just kind of has an emphasis. And I think, sometimes people misuse it.
Yeah, for
but
sure.
I think
they overuse it.
They overuse it for sure. I think, but if you win an award like the Jerry Rice Award, I think you're deserving of it. And we might get 2 more people tonight winning awards that can say they are him. So the Walter Payton Award, you have 3 finalists. You have Mark Gronowski, quarterback, South Dakota State. Max Brosmer, New Hampshire, quarterback. He's not going to be there next year, but he was there this year.
He's already enrolled in Minnesota.
Yeah, so he might have to catch a flight right after this, get back up there, start those new classes. And then you have a running back, 2-time finalists, or 2-time top 3 finalists because there's 30 finalists. So 2-time top 3 finalists, Jaden Sheridan from Monmouth. So let's start off with Mark Gronowski and break down his stats from this season. So what have you seen from him?
I think it's not the stat padding that you usually see. Like, he doesn't have like Lindsey Scott numbers or Cole Kelly or Eric Berrier, but it's just the consistency for me. The offense is not built for him to throw for 450 yards a game. Give me 200. Don't turn the football over and be versatile as an athlete in the back end. That's all you got to do. Just get the ball to your playmakers. He's done everything he's needed to do. And I think a lot of voters probably doesn't have the gaudy numbers. I think when you look at his career, everything he's overcome from injuries to, having to get his job back when he got back from an injury. Because, I mean, he went through so much because he got injured on this field in his true freshman season. He's been the epitome of consistency. I think also, too, with the awards, you got to look at wins eventually, too. The guy's, 36-1 as a starter, 35-1 against FCS programs, and led every year he's been a full-time starter. He's got to the Natty. I don't know what else you can ask for a quarterback. If I told you get a quarterback who doesn't turn the football over, can run, can throw, would win you 36 of 37 games, everyone in the country would take him. So I think that's his argument.
Yeah, and I asked him yesterday, does it ever get old getting to the Frisco? He said it doesn't. So, I mean, third year here, third year starting. So that's really part of his case. I mean, a lot of people say wins aren't a QB stat. I will say wins are a QB stat, in my opinion. I think wins have to be a QB stat. So that's something to factor in for Gronowski. Up next, you have Max Brosmer, New Hampshire. You want to talk about numbers?
Oh, that's where the numbers come in.
That's where they come in.
Because he put up some crazy stats. And also, too, he did it on a team. Like, yes, they had Lafayette running back who was going to the Senior Bowl, probably going to be a draft pick. But there was really no one, do you point to anyone and say that's an elite target?
No,
or that's an elite help. Like, their offensive line has some talent, but no one that was at an elite level. And then 2, on the defense side of the ball, a lot of their stars got hurt this year. And so that New Hampshire team went through a lot of growing pains this year. They had to play a lot of young people. And every week I don't think they ever lost a game because of him. And so if you're looking for the statistical argument, a guy who maybe didn't play on a team as loaded as a South Dakota State, this is your guy with Brosmer.
Yeah, and I think Brosmer really kept New Hampshire in that hunt down into November. I mean, if you were to say New Hampshire had a chance into November, it's largely because of Brosmer being able to push that ball downfield. And that really opened up things for Lobby too. I mean, you have that great weapon, but being able to have that balance of being able to push the ball vertically and also have someone underneath in that running back, I think was great for him. And I think, like you said, if it's a numbers case, he has Walter Payton Award numbers.
Yeah.
So any year beyond this year, we might be looking at him in this class as the winner.
Right.
But speaking of years beyond this year, we can go to years past this year and go to Jaden Sheridan from Monmouth. I want to talk about numbers.
Yeah.
He's the one who's done it consistently year after year after year. And it's not even anything too spectacular beyond the fact that it's one cut and go for him. He's really explosive. Like you give him a slimmer of daylight, he can take it to the house.
Yeah. And the crazy part with them is like you had the guy who also led the country in receiving yards on that team, and Damier Miller. So it's like, how in the world do they put a balance between these two guys? But with him, the reason that I think he has a really strong argument is, Tony Muskett transfers right before the year over to Virginia. They have a brand new quarterback. Miller does this thing at wide receiver. The offensive line, I don't think I had any all-conference picks. It was a inexperienced, kind of underrated offensive line, I would call it. And he every single week would put up crazy numbers. Like you said, if you want an explosive threat at running back, this is your guy. I mean, for 2 years straight, averaged 6-7 yards per carry. And last year, if you remember, they split red zone carries with another running back who had double-digit touchdowns. So just imagine what his stats would have been if he would have got a majority of those red zone carries and opportunities at least. I think Sheridan's amazing. I think there's a reason he declared as a junior. Because think about it, he could have came back and been back at this spot too.
Or even hit the portal like a lot of people.
Yeah. So I think he's done what he could. And if there was ever a year for a running back to win it, because we don't have a Lindsey Scott, we don't have an Eric Berry, we don't have a Cole Kelly, we don't have a Cooper Kupp or someone like that who's putting up record numbers. If there was a year a running back is going to win this award, I think it's this year.
Yeah, I think the numbers and consistent for him to make it back twice.
Yes.
Especially his numbers this year weren't as good as last year, but he still made it back as a finalist, which shows how much the voters respect him as a player. And I remember you mentioned even when his numbers he wasn't leading the nation in rushing. When we did our midseason talk, he wasn't leading the nation in rushing. He didn't have double-digit touchdowns at that point. And you're still like, yeah, he's somebody who could come on down the stretch. And he did. Here he is down here in Frisco. So, I mean, he could win this award. I think if you're looking for someone electrifying, first running back, I think since 2003, Colgate running back. So he could be that first guy in that quarterback streak. I think he could get that done.
Yeah, I'm interested because I've talked to a lot of voters, and this might be because with me voting, I try to reach out to the voters, see how they feel about stuff. It's been really torn. I've gotten a lot of crazy feedback, and I think even when we switch over to the Buchanan Award, it is really torn on that side. So, but I'll be very interested to see. I think whoever wins it tonight will deserve it. And I know there's a lot of FCS fans, and I don't agree with them that they're kind of rooting for a Sheridan or a Gronowski to win it because they stuck with the FCS through it all. And it'd just be weird giving an award to a guy who's already enrolled at a Power 5 school.
Taking the award back with them.
Yeah, back to Minnesota, baby. Minnesota gets the first Walter Payton Award in school history.
Yeah, I think if I had to pick a winner right now, I'd probably lean based off of the number of voters. I'd probably lean Gronowski based off of all the voters, and I think that's the safest pick.
Yes.
But I wouldn't be surprised if Sheridan gets it either.
I wouldn't either. I think it's going to come down to Sheridan and Gronowski. Just to me being a voter, I did vote for Gronowski. I think that's no surprise for anyone who's paid attention to what I've been putting out there. I think he is the best player in the country this year for the best team too. And without it, you take him off that team with all the talent that they have, I still don't think they're the same team. So I think Mark Gronowski deserves this award. And I don't like career awards, but I think looking at his career too, it'll be an amazing stamp on what he's done for South Dakota State and the FCS as a whole.
Yeah, for sure. And then you mentioned the Buchanan Award is even more convoluted than the Walter Payton Award. You have Terrell Allen, Tennessee State. You have Billy Schaefer, Lafayette. And you have Dylan Kelly, Albany. Let's start off with Terrell Allen,
Mm.
leader in the nation in sacks, leader in the nation in tackles for loss, explosive off the edge. You do that, lead the nation in sacks and tackles for loss. You can look back to Isaiah Land, Jordan Lewis, even Vandenberg led the nation in one of those stats last year. So it's a theme going on with that.
Yeah, I think for me as a voter, I value negative plays more than I do just a bunch of tackles. Like, I'll be honest, I don't care if a guy has 130 tackles in the year and he only has 2.5 tackles for loss. What were you doing? Like, tackling a dude 6 yards down the field isn't helping us. We need you to tackle them behind the line of scrimmage. Terrell Allen went on a run about mid-October that might have been, he was the most dominant player in college football at any level. I mean, 4, 5, 6 tackles for loss in a game, multiple sacks, and he played on a defense that was really underrated in the Big South OVC with Tennessee State. I mean, Bryce Phillips going to an FBS program right now. They had Monroe Beard. They had so much talent, but he still stood out. And the thing that really helped him is Jalen Bell goes out with injury for the year at defensive tackle. They really didn't have anyone else. They were playing a true freshman. Eddie George's son got a lot of playing time at defensive tackle. They were playing a bunch of young guys, and it still didn't matter. They knew that number 9 was the guy you had to block. They couldn't do it. Like you said, almost 30 tackles for loss and 15 sacks for an undersized edge rusher, too. He was going up against guys that were usually bigger than him and just dominating, and he's so quick off the edge. I'm hoping he gets a shot at the next level, but I think his year this year was one of the most dominant in Tennessee State history.
Yeah, I loved his dominance. I got the chance to watch him play against Lindenwood, one of those 4-sack games he had. And I was in the booth sitting, his SID was behind me. I'm just listening to the stats. I'm like, excuse me? Like, how many did you say he had? And I'm like, again? Like, that, it was crazy. He had like 8 sacks and like 8 tackles for loss in 2 weeks. It was kind of insane to see that. I mean, one of them was against Lincoln of California,
Yes.
which is a lower tier, and of course Lindenwood just moved up. But nonetheless, to do that when teams see you dominant and they will chip, they will double team, to still be able to get past them is still very impressive. So for Allen, I think for him, the numbers case and the recent history, I think, has to pay off. I mean, Lewis, Land, 2 more HBCU edge rushers who had the numbers like this, led the nation, and still got the award. So I think for him, it's going to play in his favor just with off those numbers. So I think up next we can go to someone else with a lot of numbers, Dylan Kelly. He has a lot of numbers. I think he had, I don't know, did he have a 20 tackle game this year?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah,
Or it was right there, like 19, 18.
it was close enough for me to think it was 20 tackles. At the end of the day, it's still a lot of tackles. So
Yeah, I mean, you got to think, because yes, they had the edge rushers that were elite and Anton and AJ Simon, but they really didn't have a huge interior presence. And he still found a way to make a huge impact, whether it was negative plays, clogging up the middle. I mean, it was insane. And I mean, his year was absolutely insane, because I think with total tackles, he was up over 150 this year. I mean, that's crazy numbers for that defense. And I think that he was a huge key for Albany's success this year. But they're voted 10th preseason in the CAA. And then you had Dylan Kelly, Walter Payton Award. Buchanan Award finalist. You had 2 All-American defensive ends, an All-American corner, and Amir Hall. That defense deserves a lot of credit for what they did. And I think he was the main leader at that Mike spot.
yeah, and watching him play, it was someone who can kind of do it all a little bit. Every down linebacker, which is important in this day and age. So against Idaho in the playoffs, of course, playoff performances don't necessarily count for the voters, but against Idaho, you have one of the best quarterbacks in the country in Giovanni McCoy, and he was able to be part of that defense to kind of shut him down. They weren't getting sacks in that game, but they still kind of slowed down that team, and you had one of the most explosive edge or running backs in the country in Anthony Woods, and they were able to slow them down and shut him down. So that just shows how good he was at his job. And I think that's one of the most important things you can ask a middle linebacker to do your job. And he did that at a very high level this year. Now, the last guy from the Patriot League, Billy Schaefer. You don't always see a Patriot League guy putting up the numbers that he was putting up, especially off the edge, stand-up linebacker. We want to talk about versatile. that was him this year, Billy Schaefer.
Yeah, I think when I look at I guess finalists for the Buck Buchanan, he's probably the most versatile one, like you said, because he can step down into the edge rushing role. He can step back into like a Mike position. He can play the outside linebacker role. He can do so much. And then too, I just talked about it. Tackles for loss and sacks means so much more than just random tackles in the game. And 21 and a half tackles for loss, 10 sacks, and he was forcing turnovers. He did it all. And I do think the voters are going to look at it, and I hate when people use the whole conference strength argument for stuff, but there's a lot of voters that come from the Big Sky, come from the Valley, and they're going to use it against them. But when you watch the film, this guy deserves to be here, and I think he was one of the best players in the country this season.
Yeah, and with him, he also dropped back in coverage too sometimes
Yes.
too. So he really had a lot on his plate, and they say don't ask to eat if you can't handle what's on your plate. And he had a lot of food on his plate, and he would eat on that defensive front for Lafayette.
Just imagine if he would have played edge rusher all season. Because we just talked about he's dropping in coverage. He's going back to the Mike spot. I mean, he's probably putting up Terrell Allen stats if he gets the amount of reps at the edge rusher spot that a true edge rusher would get. I mean, and especially too, you look at some of the there's some really good offensive linemen. I mean, especially Holy Cross. You look at like a Luke Newman, those guys, they all weren't cupcake games. He was putting up crazy stats against good teams. And you saw against Delaware, I think Lafayette proved that they can compete with some of these other teams in the country. 9-2. Everyone, I mean, we pretty much gave Holy Cross the trophy in August. It was probably engraved, and they probably had it in their trophy case. And Lafayette comes out of nowhere. And I think he was a huge reach, especially defensively. And then, of course, on the flip side, I mean, the running back Curtis was amazing, and they really got clicking. But I think you got to look at Schaefer as the key to Lafayette's success this season.
Yeah, for sure. And when it comes down to picking a winner, of course, I have to look at those numbers. I think those numbers leading the nation in 2 stat categories like that is going to play well in Allen's favor, but I wouldn't be surprised if any of them win.
It's been very torn. I'll say this: I voted for Allen, and I think even when we did our joint show mid-season, I don't think that's a surprise. I talked about that. I predicted him to win it, and he just kept producing. And like I said, a dominant edge rusher is almost like a good quarterback. When you got someone putting up those type of numbers at quarterback, they're going to win the Walter Payton. It's the same way for the Buck Buchanan edge rusher. I just think he was the most impactful player out of these 3 guys. And I mean, he was setting records, man. Anytime you can get 30 tackles for loss in 11 games, you're doing something crazy. And I think Terrell Allen, too, looking at his journey, he was an all-conference guy, Austin Peay, a freshman All-American, all this stuff. This would be a huge cap on his career at the FCS level.
Yeah, for sure. And a great get for Eddie George as he continues to build that program at Tennessee State. We'll talk about NFL guys that are still at the FCS level. Got to shed a light on some of them because everyone talks about the guy who left, but no one talks about the guys who coached in the NFL and played in the NFL that are still here. So got to talk about some of them. And I think when we get down to it, what do you think is going to take a former corner like myself? What do you think it's going to take for a DB to win the Buck Buchanan Award? Like how many picks? Like 5, 6?
I think it's going to have to be maybe 7, dude. I mean,
7.
really, truly, like probably 7.
So you're saying we should extend the voting to after the playoffs so Cole Wisniewski from North Dakota State can get in there?
Because you would have to, I think for a corner, the thing that you would have to do is you would have to have a breakout year the year before you win it and be on the radar. Like I think a guy, I look at like a Maxwell Anderson. If he would have put up like a similar year that he had last year with all those stats, there would have been a chance that he could have been in the conversation. But I think for a corner, the problem is, and we talked about this earlier with Deshaun, no one looks at the and I got to get with Craig and get him to email it out. But like, we need how many touchdowns do they allow? Like, how many catches are they allowed? Are they shutting down the field? Most voters are probably just looking at, oh, we've got 30 tackles and 2 picks and 5 pass breakups. That's not Buck Buchanan worthy. It's like, but if he was only targeted 20 times and allowed a handful of catches, why is that not Buck Buchanan worthy if he's shutting down the side of the field?
Maybe get Amazon to come in there and get some of those advanced analytics for them. So we do have a question in the chat. We haven't even, it says, who will be in the championship game next year? We haven't even got to next year. That's a hard question.
With the transfer portal.
Like, I mean, I would have said Idaho if it wasn't for the transfer portal, would make it.
Yeah,
but
I don't know if they're going to make it now with Giovanni, Anthony, Hayden gone,
too many
Marcus gone.
Yeah,
I think next year, to be honest with you, is one of the most wide open years we've had in a long time. Just because you look at North Dakota State had a down. down year. And then they're probably going to reload. We'll see what they look like, who they go with at quarterback. But then you look at Montana State, lost a whole lot of players to the portal. Or how are they going to reload, especially on the
They
offensive
lost
line?
Omar.
Yeah, and then you look at a Montana. Are they going to be back potentially? We'll see how many people return and all this. But until we see the full recruiting cycle shift out, the whole transfer portal cycle, man, I mean, we still got a whole transfer portal cycle after spring.
Yeah.
So I have no idea who's transferring in or out. So I think it's way too early. But I think there's a good group of probably 6 teams that could compete for the championship next year. And then
Yeah.
South Dakota State's losing a lot of people potentially after this season. So how are they going to reload next season?
Yeah, I think you got to look at teams that reload. You got to look at quarterback, and
Yeah.
I try to make a top 10 quarterbacks coming back. I made that in ahead of Idaho and UAlbany playing because I had both of those guys and they both left. So
Yeah,
I can't even tell right now. So there's no answer. No answer. Just it's wide open. That's the answer. So I think if we don't have any more questions in the chat, we have best restaurants in Frisco. Haven't really ate at too many
yeah,
restaurants.
same. I
down
don't have
here.
I will say the local is awesome. So yeah, the local here, I guess, would be the shout out.
Yeah, I think the food out here is pretty good. Of course, you can never go wrong with some Texas barbecue.
Yeah,
Out here and travel. It is the Dallas area, so
it's a lot of
yeah, it's a
options.
lot of options, a lot of options. But yeah, I mean, someone did ask for a score prediction. I don't think you think we should do a score prediction. What do you
I've
think?
already released mine, so
What do you have for your
um,
score prediction?
I got South Dakota State 38-14.
38
Yeah,
points on this Montana defense.
yes. I've seen them put up that many points on other good defenses, and also too, I I got a feeling that every week we talk about, well, someone's going to give them a run for their money. Someone's going to put them in danger, and no one does. And they just consistently prove that they're that good. I think coming into the year, they were my favorite to win it because of all the returning starters. I just think there's too many weapons offensively. And with Montana, they've really haven't played their best games in the postseason this year. And there were a few times where one play was different. If the tip pass against North Dakota State, if Keelan White just isn't standing there accidentally, North Dakota State probably wins that game because I mean they could not stop Cole Payton in that rushing attack. And you look at that Furman game, if Tyler Huff doesn't play horrible in the first quarter, or they don't punt to Junior Bergen for no reason. I mean, so there's so many things. I just don't think Montana is a complete enough team to beat South Dakota State tomorrow.
Yeah, I would probably go South Dakota State winning as well if I had it. I haven't thought of a score prediction yet, so this is definitely on the fly. But I would say 31. I don't think they're going to score more than I don't think they're 38 seems a little high. I mean, I think Montana's defense is good enough and their offense time of possession wise can make it a few less possessions for them to get all the way up to 38 because that's 6 scoring possessions. I think that's a lot. I think that's a lot.
I think they pull away late too. I think
Way late. That's what I think too. I think
it's kind of like last year. I mean, because North Dakota State was in that game way more than what was it 45 that they put up, but it was late. They gave up some explosive touchdowns. The Yankee twin catching the explosive touchdown pass in the edge, and then Amar Johnson just going crazy at times and having those explosive touchdowns. I think they score a good bit late.
Yeah, I think it also was a second half pull away. I think that third quarter out of halftime is really when South Dakota State really finds their groove in a lot of times. So I think for them, I like 31 points for them. I think they get 4 touchdowns and a field goal from Hunter Dustman. Probably field goal into halftime. That's what I would think. I would say 41 or 31-17. That's what I'm thinking. I think that 17 for them, a lot of it I would say halftime's probably around maybe like a 17-10 South Dakota State, and then in that third quarter things begin to pull away.
Yeah, I just when I look at Montana, the run game has taken a step back in the playoffs. I think South Dakota State has a good chance of taking that away. And do you trust Clifton McDowell to go out there and have a career game against this defense? And I just think South Dakota State has too many defensive weapons. And they got the athleticism at linebacker to keep Clifton's legs contained. They have the secondary to force a lot of turnovers. And also, too, their offensive line is so big and dominant. And I just question, because we know Governor's great. We know they have the first level. Riley Wilson, the edge rusher, is great. Do they have the depth? Because we saw even that UAlbany game, they did not have the depth. And they just wore down that UAlbany team consistently. And I'm worried that could happen again. And I just think that 605 Hogs is going to be the key to really dominating tomorrow.
Yeah, so we'll find out tomorrow,
Yep.
2 p.m. Eastern time, 1 p.m. here in Frisco, Texas. That can confuse you if you're from the East Coast. It confused me a couple of days ago. I was looking at someone say, yeah, 1 p.m. on Sunday. I'm like, huh? But it is 1 p.m. Central Time, 2 p.m. Eastern. You can watch the game on ABC, follow along. You have FCS Football Central, NCAA.com, both covering the game. Be sure to stay tuned.